I used to believe that love meant never saying no. For nearly 70 years, I lived by that rule, first as a daughter, then a wife, and finally as a mother. Especially as a mother. My whole world orbited around my son Daniel. Even after he married Lena, even after he had children of his own, I kept revolving around him, quietly, faithfully, like a satellite that doesn't know it can drift away. When I retired 5 years ago, I thought I'd finally have time for myself. I even made a list: watercolor classes, morning walks by the lake, a book club that met on Thursdays. But that list ended up folded in a drawer. Daniel and Lena needed help with the children, just until they found their rhythm. I remember laughing and saying, "Of course, sweetheart. What else is retirement for?" At first, it felt wonderful. Little Emma was barely 2, and baby Noah would curl against my chest like a warm loaf of bread. I'd hum lullabies, make soup, fold their laundry the way my mother taught me, sleeves tucked in, corners neat. The house smelled of talcum powder and tomato sauce, and I thought, this is what love feels like. Busy hands, tired feet, and a full heart. But slowly, that warmth began to cool. Lena started making comments, small at first, like harmless paper cuts. "Oh, you still use that kind of bottle? We've moved past those old methods." Or, "Mom, please don't let Emma nap so long. It messes up her sleep schedule." She'd say it with a tight smile, her phone glowing in her hand, eyes barely meeting mine. I told myself not to take it personally. She was young, learning. I'd been a daughter-in-law once, too. But then she began correcting me in front of the children. One afternoon, I told Emma to say thank you after I handed her a cookie. Lena swooped in, all bright and brittle. "Mom, we're teaching her not to say thank you for snacks. It creates food shame." Food shame. I'd survived a war and a marriage that ended in widowhood, and now I was being lectured about cookies. Still, I smiled. I always smiled. Because families stick together, don't they? That's what I told myself. The weekends blurred into weekdays. I was at their house more often than my own. I'd get there by 8 a.m. After making breakfast for myself, I was too tired to eat. Some days I'd stay until Daniel came home past 6. I'd scrub counters, fold tiny clothes, and sometimes sit in the car before driving home, staring at my own hands. They looked older each week. Once, when I mentioned maybe taking a Saturday off to see a friend, Lena laughed softly and said, "Of course, but let us know early next time. We plan our weekends around your help." Your help. Those words lingered like perfume you can't wash off. One evening, Daniel called me from work. His voice sounded strained. "Mom, Lena's got a late meeting tomorrow, and I'll be on site all day. Could you come by again? Just this once?" I hesitated. I'd been there all week. My knees ached, and my sister had invited me to lunch. But I said yes. I always said yes. When I arrived the next morning, Lena was rushing out the door. She handed me a list: snacks, nap times, screen limits, and a perfunctory hug that smelled of impatience. "You're a lifesaver," she said. But she didn't look me in the eye. That afternoon, Emma asked if she could paint. I spread out newspapers, filled a cup with water, and let her swirl colors. Red, blue, yellow, her tiny hands blooming across the page. When Lena came home, she frowned at the mess. "Mom, we don't do paints without supervision. It stains the floor." I glanced down. One drop of red near the rug. I offered to clean it, but she sighed. "It's fine," she said, but her tone made it clear. It wasn't. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about how I used to paint with Daniel when he was her age. He once covered an entire wall with crayon drawings. I'd laughed so hard I cried. Back then, chaos meant joy. Now it meant judgment. A few weeks later, Lena promised me a weekend off. "You've been doing too much," she said sweetly. "Take some time for yourself." I was grateful. I called my sister Carol and we planned a day together. Just us, like the old times. We'd visit the market, have lunch by the lake, maybe even take those watercolor classes we'd been talking about. Friday evening, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Hey Mom, sorry for the late notice, our sitter canceled. Could you come tomorrow? It's just from 9 to 3. Promise it won't be a full day. I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to say yes, that automatic reflex. But something inside me, small, trembling but stubborn, whispered, "Not this time." I typed slowly, hands shaking. "I'm sorry. Lena. I already have plans with Carol. I can help Sunday instead if you need." I pressed send and exhaled. My heart thudded like I'd done something reckless. The reply came within a minute. "You've made your priorities clear." That was it. 6 words. No punctuation. No thank you, I read it once, then again. The meaning shifted with every reread. Accusation, disappointment, warning. "You've made your priorities clear." I tried to sleep, but the words pulsed behind my eyes. I imagined her showing the message to Daniel, rolling her eyes, saying, "See? Your mother only helps when it's convenient." Saturday morning, I didn't go. Carol picked me up, cheerful and unaware. We walked by the lake, but I couldn't relax. I kept checking my phone. No calls. No messages. When I got home that evening, I noticed a missed call from Daniel. My stomach clenched. I called back, no answer. I told myself he was busy. Still, anxiety coiled in my chest. I busied myself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables I didn't want to eat. The house felt too quiet. Every sound, the fridge humming, the clock ticking, seemed to underline the silence from my son. By 10, I gave up pretending to watch television. I sat in bed and opened Lena's message again. "You've made your priorities clear." I tried to understand why it hurt so much. Maybe because it sounded like a verdict. As if I'd been on trial for choosing one day of freedom, and the jury had spoken. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Every version felt defensive, needy. I didn't want to sound like that. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. My heart leapt. Another message from Lena. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I just stared at the screen, the notification glowing like a warning light. My thumb hovered over it, but something stopped me. I set the phone down face down, as if that could stop whatever was coming next. Lying there, I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my pride. All the "sure, I don't mind," and, of course, "anything for you." I thought about the years of saying yes until my own needs disappeared, and I realized I didn't even know who I was when I wasn't being useful. That thought frightened me more than Lena's words. I turned off the lamp and stared into the dark, the silence thick as water. My phone buzzed again, a longer vibration this time. Another message. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and shut my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't reach for the phone. I told myself I'd read it in the morning, but deep down I already knew. Whatever waited on that screen, it was going to change everything. When I finally opened my eyes the next morning, the house was wrapped in that heavy silence that follows a storm you didn't hear arrive. The sun was spilling through the blinds, but my chest felt cold. I reached for my phone, still face down on the nightstand. The screen was black for a moment, and then it lit up with the notification I'd ignored the night before. It wasn't just one message. It was a thread, long, pulsing with gray and blue bubbles. The first thing I noticed wasn't the words, but the length. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. My stomach tightened with every flick of my thumb. The message wasn't private. It was in the family group chat. My sister-in-law, my cousins, even Daniel's aunt from Chicago, everyone was in there. And at the top of the thread, Lena's name glowed like a flare. Her first line hit like a slap. "I can't stay silent anymore about how manipulative and controlling this behavior has become." My breath caught. I read on. She wrote that I'd refused to help with the kids out of spite. That I'd used guilt to control. Daniel! That I expected constant praise for doing the bare minimum as a grandmother. She said I'd been making Lena feel unsafe in her own home with my passive-aggressive comments. Each sentence was a little dagger wrapped in politeness. She used words like concern and boundaries, but every line twisted the truth until it barely resembled reality. Halfway through, I reached the line that stopped my heart. "Daniel agrees with me." My hand went numb. I had to put the phone down before I dropped it. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the sunlight crawling across the wall. The clock ticked loudly, a metronome for disbelief. Daniel agrees with me. That was the moment the world tilted. My son, my only child, the one I'd raised through sickness, through his father's death, through everything, agreed with her? My hands trembled as I picked up the phone again. I scrolled through the reactions in the chat. A few heart emojis, a few "so sorry you're going through this" from relatives who barely knew me. No one asked for my side, not one. I tried calling Daniel, once, twice, straight to voicemail. I didn't cry. Not yet. My body went into that frozen, calm people mistake for strength. I made tea I didn't drink, tidied the counter, even wiped down a spotless stove. Every motion felt like walking underwater. By noon, my phone began buzzing with calls. My cousin, my niece, even an old neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. They all wanted to hear my side, but their voices carried curiosity, not compassion. Like they were tuning into a soap opera, not my life. "Maybe you should just apologize," one said softly. "Even if you didn't mean it, it'll calm things down. Calm things down." As if this were just another spat. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in front of me, replaying the years that led here. The hundreds of meals I'd cooked, the weekends I'd given up, the nights I'd rocked their children while they slept. And all I could think was, how did love become a weapon they could use against me? A flashback rose, vivid and cruel. Daniel was 21, first year of university, his father only 6 months gone. He'd called me crying because rent was late. I'd taken out a small loan, even though my own bills were overdue. I remember his voice shaking when he said, "I'll pay you back, Mom." He never did, and I never asked. Because that's what mothers do. We give without keeping score. Then another memory. Daniel and Lena's wedding. She'd looked radiant, I'll admit that. I remember standing beside her mother during photos and she whispered, "You raised a good man." I'd smiled so wide my face ached. I believed we were becoming one family. How naive that sounds now. The next few days blurred together. I didn't eat much. I didn't go out. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, but it was never Daniel. I replayed the text over and over, dissecting each line, wondering what part of me had earned such contempt. By the fourth day, shame had turned into something heavier, a hollow ache, the kind that makes time feel thick. I began to think maybe Lena was right. Maybe I was too involved. Maybe I had made her feel smothered. But then a different thought surfaced. If I'd been so terrible, why had they let me raise their children for years without complaint? Why had they let me pay their electric bill that winter Daniel was laid off? Why had Lena called me Mom at all? The phone rang again, Daniel's name. My pulse quickened. I answered immediately. "Daniel?" A pause. Then his voice, low, cautious. "Mom, I just wanted to say, maybe it's best if we all take a little space right now." "Space?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Daniel, I don't even understand what I did wrong." He sighed, the kind of sigh that ends conversations. "Lena's really hurt. She feels you've been undermining her." "Undermining her?" I almost laughed. "Daniel, I've done everything I can to help you too." "I know, Mom," he said, quick, dismissive. "But sometimes helping can cross lines." And just like that, the call ended. I stared at the silent phone. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. That word, lines. It sounded like a fence between us. One I hadn't realized I wasn't allowed to cross. 2 weeks later, I decided to try again. I baked Emma's favorite cookies, packed small gifts for the kids, and drove to their house. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel the whole way. I told myself it would be fine, that once Daniel saw me, everything would soften. Lena opened the door. Her smile was polite, practiced. "Oh, hi, Mom." I held up the cookies. Thought the kids might like a treat. She didn't open the door wider. "That's thoughtful," she said, voice flat. "But we're actually just heading out." I heard footsteps in the hall. Daniel. He appeared behind her, adjusting his watch, avoiding my eyes. "Daniel," I said quietly, I just want to talk for 5 minutes. Lena's hand brushed his arm. We really can't right now. The kids are already in the car. Emma's little face peeked from behind Lena's legs, eyes lighting up when she saw me. Grandma! She squealed. Lena turned quickly. Emma, honey, we're going. Say goodbye. Bye, Grandma, she said, waving her tiny hand as Lena shut the door. The sound of the latch was louder than it should have been. I stood there for a long time, holding the cookies like an idiot. My throat burned. The neighbor across the street was raking leaves. He glanced up and nodded politely, and I forced a smile before walking back to my car. On the drive home, the world looked blurred, edges too bright. The traffic lights smeared red and green across the windshield like tears. I pulled over halfway and just sat, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. At home, I placed the uneaten cookies on the counter. The silence was unbearable. Every corner of the house whispered with echoes of laughter that wasn't there anymore. I walked into Daniel's old room. The posters were gone, but the faint outlines remained on the walls, ghosts of who we'd been. I sat on his bed and let myself cry for the first time. Deep, raw sobs that came from somewhere ancient. I realized then that it wasn't just the loss of their affection, it was the loss of my role, my purpose. I'd built my entire identity around being needed, and now that I wasn't, I felt invisible. The next morning, I deleted the family group chat. My thumb hesitated over the confirmation button, but I pressed it anyway. The screen went blank. The quiet that followed was strange, painful, but also clean. Like tearing off a bandage, I whispered into the emptiness. I raised a son who forgot his mother. The words hung there, fragile and final. But under the ache, a seed of something else stirred, a faint, unfamiliar defiance. I didn't know it yet, but that small spark would grow. Because even in heartbreak, there comes a point when a woman decides she's had enough of being sorry for existing. And that moment, though quiet, changes everything. Grief is strange. It doesn't end the way people promise. It just gets quieter, like a radio turned low but never off. For months after the family chat exploded, I lived inside that low hum of sorrow. I stopped answering calls. I stopped cooking for one. Even the plants on my windowsill wilted, tired of waiting for sunlight that never came. Every morning I'd make tea and sit by the window, staring at the street where children walked to school. Their laughter floated through the glass, bright, ordinary. Mine used to sound like that once. But now silence was safer. Silence couldn't be twisted into guilt. The change began almost by accident. One afternoon, a leaflet slid under my door. Community garden volunteers needed. I nearly tossed it away, but something about the word needed caught my eye. It had been so long since I felt needed in any way that didn't drain me. The next Saturday, I went. The air smelled of soil and cut grass. No one knew my story there. They just saw an older woman who liked flowers. I spent hours digging, planting, sweating under the sun. By the end of the day, my back ached, but my chest felt light. I realized I hadn't thought about Lena or Daniel once. That night, I wrote in a notebook for the first time in decades. The first sentence surprised me. I'm still here. From then on, I wrote every evening. At first, it was just the facts. What happened? Who said what? Then slowly, it turned into something else. A reckoning. Each page was a confession to myself. Weeks turned into months. I joined a book club. I started volunteering twice a week. I even went dancing once, with a widower named Martin who smelled faintly of cedar and sadness. I laughed that night, real laughter, the kind that shakes loose the dust from your ribs. Then one evening, I ran into a mutual friend at the grocery store. Her name was Tessa, one of Lena's cousins. We hadn't spoken since everything happened. I tried to steer my cart away, but she called out, "Wait, please." She looked uncomfortable, twisting her shopping list between her fingers. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry for what happened. Lena's been, well, she's not easy. You're not the only one she's hurt." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Tessa sighed. "She's cut off her own parents now. Says they overstep. She even told people you spread rumors about her." But everyone's starting to see the pattern. The words landed like cautious sunlight through clouds, gentle, healing. For months I'd questioned my own sanity. Hearing someone else finally name what I'd endured didn't fix everything, but it steadied the ground beneath me. That night, I wrote a single sentence in my journal. Truth doesn't need to scream. 2 weeks later, I was pruning roses at the garden when my phone buzzed. Daniel. I froze. My first instinct was to let it ring out, but something in me whispered, "Face it." "Hello?" My voice was calm, almost detached. "Mom." His tone was hesitant, rough. "Can we talk?" I took a slow breath. "Of course." We met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. He looked older, tired around the eyes. For a moment, he was my little boy again, the one who used to press dandelions into my palm and call them gold flowers. He started talking before the coffee arrived. "Lena and I were going through a rough patch. She's been seeing someone for a while. I found out last month." His eyes flickered away. I didn't know who else to call. My heart clenched, but not out of revenge, out of recognition. Pain has a way of softening old anger. "I'm sorry, Daniel," I said quietly. He nodded, swallowed hard. "Mom, about what happened? The texts, everything. I was stupid. I believed her because it was easier than standing up to her." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the ripples. "It's hard to see clearly when love demands blindness," I said. He rubbed his face with his hands. "I hurt you. I know that. I don't expect forgiveness." I met his eyes. "I don't want apologies. I want honesty. From now on." He nodded again, tears gathering but not falling. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to comfort him. I just sat there, steady, present. Over the next months, Daniel began visiting on his own. At first it was awkward, stiff smiles, short conversations. But slowly the walls thinned. He'd call to ask for recipes or drop by after work with takeout. I noticed he listened differently now, without defensiveness. One evening, he came over with the kids. Emma was taller, her hair longer. Noah ran straight into my arms, shouting, "Grandma!" The house filled with laughter again, but it was different this time. Lighter. Freer. After dinner, Daniel lingered by the door. "Mom, thank you for giving me another chance." I smiled, touched his cheek. "Just don't waste it." That night, after they left, I stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd once cried over cold tea and unanswered texts. Now the air felt warm, safe. The dishes sparkled under the light. I realized something simple but profound. I could love my family without losing myself. The following weekend, Daniel asked if I could babysit while he ran errands. For a moment, old instinct tugged at me, the need to say yes immediately. But I paused. "Let me check my schedule," I said, smiling. He laughed, a little embarrassed. "Of course, Mom." And that word, of course, felt like the truest apology. Saturday arrived. I spent the morning at the garden, chatting with friends, hands deep in the earth. By noon, I headed home humming. The house smelled of lavender and lemon. I'd lit a candle earlier without realizing why. Maybe I was celebrating something intangible, the peace that comes after choosing yourself. When Daniel dropped off the kids, he asked, "Are you sure you're okay with this?" "I am," I said, kneeling to hug the children. "But remember, Grandma doesn't do overnights anymore." He grinned. "Got it." As the door closed behind him, I turned to Emma and Noah, who were already scattering toys across the floor. My heart swelled. Not because they needed me, but because I'd chosen to be here. That distinction changed everything. Later, as they napped, I brewed tea and sat by the window. The afternoon sun painted gold across the walls. I thought back to the night I'd stared at my phone, too afraid to open Lena's message. How small I'd felt, how desperate for approval. And now here I was, steady, content, whole. When Daniel returned to pick them up, Emma clung to my leg. "Grandma, can we come again next week?" I smiled. "We'll see, sweetheart." "Grandma has a busy life these days." Daniel laughed. "That's new." "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes. "It is." After they left, the quiet didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. I looked around my little home, the garden gloves on the counter, the stack of journals on the table, the vase of fresh roses. This was my life now, not centered around someone else's needs, but built on my own choices. I whispered the truth out loud, letting it settle into the room like music. Saying no didn't destroy my family. Lies did. And for the first time in years, I felt proud of the sound of my own voice. Boundaries are not betrayal. They are the proof that love still has shape. I used to think that saying no was selfish, that sacrifice was the highest form of affection. But now I know that love without respect rots into resentment. When I stopped begging to be understood and started standing for myself, the world didn't collapse. It opened. Families fracture when truth is silenced for the sake of peace. The real peace begins when we stop letting guilt dictate our worth. So, to anyone listening who feels erased by those they've loved most, you are not wrong for wanting rest, for needing space, for expecting gratitude. You are allowed to stop saving everyone else and start saving yourself. What would you do if your daughter-in-law turned your family against you after you said no? If my story touched you, share your thoughts and subscribe for more stories of strength, survival, and second chances.